Now, hang on here. I always introduce the podcast, and I feel like maybe I'm taking over a bit. So, shall we have someone else introduce the podcast this week?
Yeah, have you?
What about you, Dan?
Oh, I thought you had someone there to introduce it. I got excited for a second.
No, I've got my cat here, but he doesn't speak. Dan, do you want to say a few words welcoming people?
Okay, I'll give it a go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the news at Mix and Mojo, and in a few minutes, you can listen to that.
Right, I can literally hear like a bird screeching in the background.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
No.
It's a cat.
Is it?
Yeah.
So we've both got cats.
Yes, there's a cat here, but he's in disgrace because he had fleas earlier in the week.
This is exciting podcast news.
Yeah.
What is a podcast for people who don't know?
Podcast is a bit like the internet, but where you listen to it instead of read it.
It's a bit like a film, except you don't see anything.
Yes, it's a bit like a film.
It's like being blind.
It's a bit like being blind.
It's like watching a film if you're blind.
It's like going on the internet with some kind of drug that makes you only be able to interpret things through your ears.
It's like floating over a field of rhubarb and breaking your teeth.
That's probably the best analogy we're going to get, yeah.
Yeah. And we are joined with Zaarin in the studio.
Hello.
Roger.
Roger.
Good to have you back. Last week you were undisposed. You went to Brazil to do a conference. How did that go?
Went very well.
Made lots of connections.
Yeah, a lot.
Great.
Hopefully what happened a few years ago won't happen again, but, the Brazilians, you never know with them. So.
Yes, and we're also joined with you, the listener. Thank you very much for joining us. It's lovely to see you again. I'm not going to get into that again. But it's lovely to have you listening to us, listening to me talking. It's great to imagine you doing all the things that you're doing. And it's wonderful. It's so wonderful. It's amazing. You are amazing. Shall we launch into the cook chase?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. We have 3 stories. The last Cook Chase podcast story was one story. Do you want to do the next story?
The next story is that the Monkey Island special editions are coming out in Europe in retail.
Woo! Sorry, I got overexcited there.
Yes, we've won again in the LucasArts re-release kind of stakes.
And there's also a video of the week which Tim Safer's dad features in.
Yeah, I've not watched...
That's it!
That's the whole news, isn't it, again?
That's the whole news. Actually, there is something else which I forgot to write about on Mixed Mojo. Probably I will combine it with this podcast update. Is the Power of Monkey Island Part 4 has been released.
Oh, really?
That was done June 19th, so it's actually quite a long time ago. But if you haven't checked out the Power of Monkey Island, it's a radio play, which is like it's a play for people who are blind, basically.
Yes.
We cater for a lot of blind people here on Mixed Mojo. And you can download the radio play, which is all based on Monkey Island, from nightlightradio.net. And there'll be a link there in their news post, so that's very exciting.
Excellent. You gave me a strange idea there, where it would be a special control pad for blind people, where each of the verbs for the LucasArts games were in Braille, and it would be possible to play just by listening.
Yeah, I'm sure that's possible. And they should really get onto that. Maybe that will be a new feature of the combo pack.
Yeah, that would be great if it comes with the additional control pad that's just got sort of 9 buttons on it.
Yeah, and there should be a version that you can just control with your mind as well, for people who are paralyzed.
Yeah, I think LucasArts are working on that, and that's why everyone keeps getting fired.
It's actually quite exciting news for some people that there will be a little bit more stuff with the combo pack. There'll be some new storyboards and concept art from the Monkey Island animated movie. So that's actually pretty much, I think, the first official recognition we've had from LucasArts that there was a Monkey Island movie.
It absolutely is, yeah. But Steve Purcell's been putting images from this thing up on his blog for a long time, hasn't he? He's not actually explicitly stated that this was what it was, but he's, from, quote, a pirate movie and that kind of stuff. is what he says. So I think we'll have seen some of this before, but hopefully there'll be some new stuff, or at least higher definition images. It might be quite nice.
Yeah, the cat is out of the bag, which is coincidentally what's happened in your house.
Yeah, literally.
Or the cat is in the bag, perhaps. I don't know.
No, if he was in the bag, he'd probably shut up.
Yeah. But anyway, it's very exciting. Do you think that we're having like a combo pack? They've done a whole new cover art for it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's coming out. It seems like they've done a classic Lucas company thing of, holding back material so that even though we've all already bought it, all the special editions in some form or another, we're effectively required to buy it again.
And last week we were talking about Puzzle Agent 2, which neither of us have played.
No.
But Roger has played it. Is that right?
That's right.
So what did you think? Did you agree with the review that we posted on Mix and Mojo?
Yeah.
Are you going to say anything else about that?
Yeah, Tingler is a fucking idiot.
Thanks very much, Roger. You've added nothing.
You're welcome.
Now, let's talk about something else. The other exciting news this week, of course, as it is with every week, is that Dave Grossman has written another poem.
Right.
And if you don't know who Dave Grossman is, well, here's a little jingle to explain. He quit LucasArts in 1994, and ever since then, he's been very poor. Now he sits in his house and writes poetry all day. His name is David Grossman. He's a really awesome guy. Do not criticize his poetry, or you will die. The problem with that jingle is twofold. Firstly, it's a bit wonkaloid. My singing isn't... people will be going, oh, he's doing comedy singing. No, that's actually how I really sing properly. That's my serious singing voice.
Oh, really?
Secondly, I sort of implied that Dave Grossman hasn't done anything since he left LucasArts in 1994, apart from writing poetry and being very poor. But actually, he does work at Telltale.
Yeah.
He worked on computer games with Don Gilbert at Humongous, I think, wasting his talents on stupid children. And then he went to Telltale and, he did like the Monkey Island series at Telltale.
That's right.
Stuff. But his main, I always think of him mainly as a poet. And he does a weekly poem. Do you read his poetry, Dan?
I don't actually, but I'm aware of it. I know that he had a book out, and I sort of, if I start reading poetry on the internet, then that's kind of the end. There's too much of it out there.
Yeah. It was funny, actually. I met him years ago, like 5 years ago or something, back in, I think, 2007. And he, I was like, "Oh, Mr. Grossman, can I have an interview?" And he was like, "Oh, not sure. Okay, 5 minutes." Because he was about to go into an important meeting. I sat him down, and I said, "Gosh, crumbs, golly, gosh." I turned into Hugh Grant for some reason, which often happens when I visit America. And I said, "Gosh, yes. Gosh, there's a lot of computer games out, aren't there? It's a really big thing, don't you think?" and he looked at me like I was absolutely criminally insane. And then I said, "Gosh, golly, crumbs, golly, I haven't actually done this before. Golly, gosh, crumbs." And he said, "What? You've never interviewed anyone before?" I said no. And he nearly got up and left.
Really?
And then I thought, okay, I've blown this. I'll just ask the questions that I actually want to, I'm more interested in, because I hadn't played Sam & Max at that point.
Right.
And I had to interview him about Sam & Max, I just made it up.
Yeah, that's what I would have done.
But I decided to ask him about his poetry, because I quite like poetry. So I was like, okay, well, so you do these poems, so, why do you do that? And kind of who are your influences and that kind of thing. And he was talking about how he was influenced by a mathematician, poet who I hadn't heard of, but it's quite interesting. And then he talked about like the relationship between maths and poetry, and then our 5 minutes was up. So I said, okay, well, I guess we have to go now. And he said, "Oh, no, we have all the time in the world." I charmed him with my questions about poetry. So that's the thing. If you ever meet Dave Grossman,
start with the poetry.
Even if he's like chasing after you with a knife, just mention poetry, and he'll be like he'll be like putty in your hands.
That's good advice. That's very good advice. There's a few people out there on the internet who I think have been hassling Dave Grossman, and that they could do to learn the poetry technique.
Yeah.
You know, that guy who used to complain about the voices in Sam and Max should have put his arguments in poet. You know, he should have written a poem about the voice actors, and then maybe he wouldn't have gotten all that trouble.
Speaking of poetry, we are going to read out one of his poems this week on the podcast. I'm not quite sure we've got permission to do so, but we'll do it anyway. It's called Burger. A sultry disc adorned with char and cheese from out of goats, mustard like a shooting star, green onion as a grace note. A savory, flavory merger, compatibility, though the definition of the perfect burger is any one that belongs to me.
So it's
chilling stuff.
It's easy to cut through the literal kind of meaning of the poem and get to the you know what he's really talking about here, which I think is clear. Is the way the relationship between him and Ron Gilbert deteriorated when he went to work on those children's games.
Yep.
And then how they eventually worked together again on the Tales of Monkey Island. It's a very well constructed metaphor.
Yeah, that's very true, and you've got the words like merger, compatibility, but ultimately the burger belongs to me, the burger representing Monkey Island.
Right.
He's saying he's claiming it back. It's an interesting interpretation. I mean, you've got to remember, to quote Michel Foucault, the author is a principle of thrift and the proliferation of meaning.
Yes.
And perhaps we're being too biographical about this interpretation. Of course, another reading of the poem, which I think is very compelling, is that he's talking about Africa, right?
Africa. Oh, okay.
And food. So the merger implies composite parts being fused together unwillingly. The savoury, flavoury merger. Also, merger is a business term. So he's talking about the the companies that are sort of bleeding Africa dry, really.
Yes.
The compatibility is the union of flavours. But ultimately, as the last line tells us, the perfect burger is anyone that belongs to me being the West.
Right.
So the burger, which is the symbol of American imperialism, has to ultimately come back to the source that created it.
Right, I see.
And so he's saying that actually, the world's food resources should belong to America.
Sure. I can see that reading too. It brings a lot of things to mind. The sort of history of colonialism and slavery, and this idea of the burger representing exploitation. I think it's all in there, and it's very well constructed. Because I think you may not have noticed this, but it also works in a purely literal sense. If you were to interpret it purely as being about a hamburger, it still actually works. You've got to bend a few of the lines, but it does still work.
That's interesting. It's interesting how kind of like there could be an interpretation that the writer would never have dreamt of.
Yeah.
When he sat down to write this in his poetry tower, he would never have dreamed in a million years, in a trillion years, that someone would say, actually, maybe this is just about a burger.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. I wrote a rival poem.
I like how you think of poetry in terms of competition.
It is a competition, and I think I've won. Actually, to be honest with you, but I'll let you be the judge of that.
Okay.
So this is my poem, and I think it gets to the heart of the issue a lot quicker and more firmly. So this is my poem. It doesn't have a title.
Okay.
The child eats a burger. I steal the burger with a side order of glee. The child blinks and dies with a whimper. I laugh, and the laughter echoes throughout time. I resurrect the child with my evil science. I fart, and the fart explodes into a supernova that transcends the eyes of angels, that burns for the sun, that falls from the sky, that swims to the burger I stole from the child.
Wow.
Powerful stuff. Did you get all the meanings there, the metaphors?
No, I didn't pick up any of them.
Well, basically, like, you know, the child represents Africa.
Oh, I see.
That's basically it, really.
Oh well, that's so you it's on the same theme as Dave Grossman's.
Yeah.
It's you know, they're both good poems. I've got to admit that the primary effect both of them have had, and I think probably the effect that you were going for and the same effect that Dave Grossman was going for is that right now I really would just want to go to Burger King.
Yep.
And you know,
it's a wonderful restaurant.
It is indeed a fantastic restaurant, and you know, Africa be damned. I need a burger.
Yeah. So that's a good way of ending the podcast. Have a happy burger. Happy week, people.
No,
burgers.
I think everyone should have a burger.
Have a burger.
Yeah, I think anyone who doesn't have a burger by the time the next podcast comes out is in big trouble.
Did you know that burger is the German word for happy?
Is it really?
Yep.
Wow. There's a lot of German words in food.
Yep. Okay, auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye.
Goodbye.